This is the Power Break Podcast number 291, titled, I Can't Come Down. Hi, everyone. I'm Bob Brubaker, along with JT, as we hope you'll stay tuned as we seek to give you a little power in this break to help you succeed in the race of life.
This, the Power Break Podcast, with a focus on the spiritual, the mental, and the physical aspects, all to help you succeed in the race of life. For show notes from today's podcast, go to bobbrubaker.com and follow the link for the Power Break Podcast. Bob, hola, ¿cómo está?
Aloha. Wow. See, I know como vai. That's Portuguese.
Yep.
I think you said
that was
good
Spanish,
morning,
man.
Yeah. Good morning in your Spanish, and how are you? Right.
That is correct. Yep.
Hey, we're doing fine.
That's right.
Hey, thanks everyone for tuning in to the Power Break Podcast today. We appreciate your patronage by listening to the podcast and also telling your friends about the podcast. As always, we mention thank you for leaving us a rating and or a review wherever you download the podcast. That really is appreciated and helps us obtain more listeners. Right, JT?
That's right. I heard a rumor. There's algorithms, and those algorithms are all about reviews. And those reviews can either land you at the top of the search page or at the bottom. So we appreciate it. And we have such great listeners. We always do well when it comes to reviews, and I sincerely appreciate that.
So thank you, everybody. A little shout-out time, JT. I know you're thinking of people that you want to shout out to, so I'll just mention we'll shout out to Driftwood Coffee. That's Driftwood Kava Cafe. Let me try it again. Driftwood Kava Coffee Cafe.com. The link is in our show notes. Just go to bobbrubaker.com and look for the show notes, and then go through the show notes. You'll see Driftwood Coffee and the link to Driftwood Coffee. We like our Driftwood Coffee, don't we, JT?
Yes, sir. Speaking of which, you're going to have to send me some more. So, yes, I'd like it, and I need it. So make that happen, Bob. You shouldn't be too hard on yourself. That's a tough one, man. Driftwood Kava Coffee Cafe.com. It's almost like me trying to get used to bobbrubaker.com because there's so many B's in it.
Well, JT, anybody on your list that you want to shout out to today?
You know, you and I were talking about my buddy Caleb, and I've thrown a shout out to him before, but man, I just really want to encourage him. He's a youth pastor, and it really puts his heart and soul into it. And I think, right at this point, we all have peaks and valleys. I think he's kind of in a valley as far as what's going on with him. So yeah, man, keep up the good work. You do great work there, and we love you, man.
Yeah, of course, I want to shout out to all the folks from Christ Community Presbyterian Church that listen to the podcast. I appreciate our flock. Last week, JT was recording this. This will be out a week later, I think, when it's released. But anyway, I had a birthday on March the 8th. And can you believe it?
Something? That's crazy, man. Amy said something about it may have been your birthday. I don't know if I've ever known that was your birthday. Which makes me feel awful. Well, happy birthday, man.
Well, some friend you are.
I know. I'm awful. Yeah. Yeah. Sorry, dude.
No. It was a wonderful celebration, and Jan, of course, made me one of the famous homemade butterscotch pie, this old Amish recipe. It is just so good. And so I get one once a year, and she topped. This was the best ever, and I tried to ration it out, and I just finished last night the last piece of the pie.
Wow. Jan, number one, good job. But number two, if it's half as good as her lasagna, that must be an incredible pie, because her lasagna rocks.
Yeah. I've been blessed, as my friend Stan Smith, hey, shout out to Stan, always says that both he and I married up. So,
yeah, you can put me in that category.
Yeah. Too. Anyway, we thank you for listening, and I do appreciate the church that I serve here at Christ Community Presbyterian Church in Clearwater, Florida, and the folks here just are the top, and we appreciate them very much. So, JT, today we're talking about the theme, and the title of the blog is I Can't Come Down. Now, what does that title bring to your mind?
At first, that brought to my mind confusion until I saw that you were using it in context with the book of Nehemiah, and when he was tasked with rebuilding the wall. So then it really made sense. But, after I thought about it a little bit, it's so often the world tries to get us distracted from something when we're doing a good work. I would argue that's usually Satan himself getting involved in. Because he doesn't really want you to be successful for God, and he certainly doesn't want you to be successful for God's people. So I think he actively gets involved when you're on that wall and you're making sure it gets built and you're making sure it gets built right. I think he gets actively involved in that. One of my friends was talking about how much harder it is once you become a Christian as far as your life and holding yourself to a standard that's different than one you were used to, and applying discipline to your life and taking every thought captive and all those things that are really a trademark, right? Or the hallmark is probably the right word of a Christian life. He talks about how much harder it is. And I think it's because Satan didn't pay attention to you when you were in his flock. But once you started to be in the other guy's corner, and you got to pay attention to that, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. There was this lady, her name was Vivian, that used to work with me, and she was a wonderful woman. And she had a sign that said, "Every day make Satan get up and go, oh man, she's back." Right?
That's really
you want him to pay attention because it means you're doing something for God's kingdom.
You're doing
cool
something
stuff,
right.
So.
Exactly.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Well, everyone needs to read the book of Nehemiah for sure and find there are so many great principles for success there, one of which is the temptation that when he was met by his challengers to leave what he was doing, and he refused. It goes like this: Sanballat and Geshem sent to me, saying, "Come and let us meet together at Hakaphirim and the plain of Ono." Then they intended to do me harm. So I sent messengers to them, this is Nehemiah speaking, saying, "I'm doing a great work, and I cannot come down. Why should the work stop while I leave to come down to you? I'm doing a great work, and I just can't come down." Well, that's what we're looking at today, is from the blog that I wrote by that title, and you'll find it, of course, at BobBrubaker.com.
Yeah, before we talk more about your blog, folks, if you haven't been over to BobBrubaker.com, as always, I'm going to encourage you to get over there. At the very least, you can sign up for the blog while you're there, and it shows up every Monday, free of charge. MailChimp, getting it done, and it shows up so early, I just think to myself, man, is Bob somewhere pushing a button, or is that automatic? I'm not sure.
Actually, when I put the blog on the website, it automatically sends it out to the MailChimp, and MailChimp sends it out.
Oh, gotcha. Okay.
So
All
it
right.
is.
I didn't know if you got
It does
up.
correspond with me getting up early and sending it out. It's interesting that this past one, matter of fact, the past week, I always have Jan check my work. She's a
But
good
you
editor.
didn't this time, did you?
No. So I forgot to have her check it, and so I refused to send it out until she checked it. So I had to wait a little bit later. So the MailChimp was a little late. And matter of fact, if I don't hit a cutoff time, and I forget what the cutoff time is, it sends it out the next day. So
makes sense.
So
Yep.
if you didn't get the blog on Monday morning, that means I was a little late sending it out, and more than likely is because I forgot to have Jan check it. So I don't wake her up at 4:00 in the morning and say, "Hey, would you check my Power Break blog?"
That's probably why you're still married, buddy, is you make good choices like that.
Yeah.
But anyway, let's continue to talk more about your blog this week, which was I Can't Come Down.
Well, as I wrote in the blog, that I have a friend who's quite knowledgeable and talented, and if he answered every request that he gets for help, he would not only be overstressed, but quite unsuccessful due to overcommitment. As he talked to me about his dilemma of always people want him to help them, I suggested to him that he was building a wall, and to tell the constant flow of those vying for his attention that he's doing a great work and can't come down. Of course, the reference was from the book of Nehemiah, as I mentioned earlier. Nehemiah was tormented by those who wanted him to stop the work of rebuilding the wall, and so they tried every trick in the book to pull Nehemiah away from the task. And so it's easy to relate to this situation because no matter what admirable task you begin, you're confronted with multiple sides of multiple ways to get you to leave the work at hand for something else. How many different directions could you be pulled on a given day? The result, of course, means that you complete nothing, or at best, end up working late just to complete the urgent so you can try the next day to work on the important things. Going back to the counsel that I gave my friend, the counsel taken by Nehemiah, you are involved in a great work. In Nehemiah's case, it was building the wall. And in your life, it could be the top of your priority list and according to the values that you set to follow. Just think of what would become of the wall if Nehemiah would have responded to every call to come down from the wall. Not much would have been achieved, as well as, of course, he would have found it very hard to continually come down from the wall because answer every request that he had. I'm not saying that those are illegitimate requests when you get these requests for your attention, or that we should be so narrowly focused that we have no time for anything else. Rather, we can learn two things from Nehemiah's response: the urgency of the priority over the tyranny of the urgent, and the importance of redeeming the time. So, first of all, we need to decipher between the priority and the urgent. In order to keep from being overrun with the urgent things, we need to establish priorities. And so the question is, have you ever noticed how a call to a doctor's office includes the instructions that if you are calling about an actual emergency to call 911? That does not mean they are uncaring. It's simply recognizing that if the doctor ran out to respond to every emergency, the doctor would have no patience. And if the doctor couldn't see patients, there would be likely more emergencies, and on the scenario would go. What the announcement is doing is telling you that there are those who are better equipped who are standing by to help emergencies, whereas the doctor is building a wall of helping patients in the office so he or she cannot come down. So the question, JT, we have to ask ourselves is, so what is really the priority of our lives?
Yeah, and I love the exercise that you and I have talked about before, and that's sitting down and actually analyzing your time and what you spend most of your time doing. Mm-hmm. And at the end of the day, almost everybody I've ever met that truly did that exercise was surprised how much they spent on stuff that wasn't really that important. And it was just simply because, I used to tell the people that worked for me, I'm like, I am a professional dispenser of Band-Aids. That's what I am. I just throw a Band-Aid on something and put out that fire. And a lot of it, and that's what happened when, we started to have less law enforcement. So all we do now, instead of actually getting involved in a situation and actually trying to help make it resolve itself, we got to get back in service because there's not enough of us. So now we go out, whatever the quickest and most effective and legal way of dealing with it is, even though it may not be in the big picture the best way, we got to do it, right? So, yeah, I would encourage everybody to do that exercise and then identify the reason why you ended up getting distracted, why you ended up spending all that time on there. And usually I think it's because we didn't do an appropriate triage. That's, those of us that have been involved in the medical field at one point or another, the triaging a situation is really important, especially when it comes to mass casualty events. And the reason why is because not everybody has an injury that's significant enough to deserve the first ounce of attention, right? You have to figure out where that best needs to be thrown. And I would encourage everybody to do that in their life. And man, Nehemiah focused. He knew what the priority was. He stayed focused on that wall. He knew that all these distractions were going to come at him to keep him. And like I said before, I will argue that Satan's involved in all those shenanigans. Nehemiah was smart, stayed focused on what he needed to stay focused on and got the job done. And we all need to do that. But first, we need to triage what's going on.
Exactly right. And that means we look at our priorities and look at our priorities in the light of the Word of God. The second way of implementing the Nehemiah on the wall principle is the need to redeem the time. Obviously, Nehemiah's response from the wall was that he was doing a great work and could not come down. Doesn't look like time management principle, but if you read the account of the book of Nehemiah, you'll find that Nehemiah was a great servant leader who not only was the project manager for a massive rebuilding project, but he was also the appointed leader of the people, actually a spiritual leader behind the God-appointed leaders. And so he was also the captain over the people and preparing them to defend themselves against the enemies, known and unknown. So above all, Nehemiah was a servant leader who not only led the people, but participated in the building of the wall. And concerning all that he had to do, the fact that he had to do it all successfully to the glory of God, well, you can count on the fact that he took great care in redeeming the time that he had to accomplish what exactly he had to do. So, when we turn to Ephesians chapter 5, it says to look carefully how you walk, not as unwise, but as wise, making the best use of the time, because the days are evil. Therefore, do not be foolish, but understanding what the will of the Lord is. Or as Moses wrote in Psalm 90, teach us to number our days so we may get a heart to wisdom. Redeeming the time, of course, begins with establishing priorities and making sure that the top of the to-do list gets the ultimate attention, then recognizing how to fit the other things in by priority underneath the top of the list. Well, back to Nehemiah, one more thing, that his account of rebuilding the wall is in the Bible for a variety of reasons, one of which to see God can do with what God can do with a man who lives by priority. His priority was rebuilding the wall, and it was completed. When you read Nehemiah chapter 12, the dedication was fantastic. What a great blessing. What a magnificent project, magnificent sense of accomplishment that God brought about through some dedicated people, of whom there was Nehemiah, who refused to come down from the work of the wall because he knew he was involved in a great work. That's how we look at things, JT, when we say, I'm involved in a great work. I just can't come down.
Amen, brother. Amen. I love it.
Well, check out the article. It's found at BobBrubaker.com. Name of the article again is I Can't Come Down. Check it out today.
So what else is happening this week, Bob? Anything you want the listeners to know about?
Thought it'd be appropriate to talk about The Power of Time Management, the little book that I wrote on that's found at BobBrubaker.com. And while you're there, check out the book Finding Delight in the Lord's Day. I didn't mention that. It's there in the blog that I wrote about making the use of the Lord's Day. So those two books are available. Check them out, The Power of Time Management and Finding Delight in the Lord's Day, as well as the sermon links to the sermons I preach here at Christ Community Presbyterian Church in Clearwater, Florida. The sermon links and the books and more are all found at BobBrubaker.com.
Well, this is the Power Break Podcast. I'm JT along with Bob Brubaker, and this is time on the podcast for questions and answers. If you have a question for me or for Bob, feel free to email me at jt@bobbrubaker.com, and we'll get to answering your question on an upcoming Power Break podcast. So, question number 1 from the spiritual side of life. Why is this I'm doing a great work and I can't come down attitude so important today for us?
Well, we all have struggles with finding out what is really important and sticking to that. What we do is allow interruptions to take us away from priorities. Have you ever noticed, JT, the number of people that even when you're talking to them, where a one-on-one conversation should be the priority, but they keep looking at their phone? I say, what in the wide world of sports, What are you doing? Yeah. Looking at your phone, you're talking to me, And unfortunately, this happens with couples,
Yes.
We've all seen that. A couple they're out to eat, and you're sitting across, the room from you, and you happen to look at, and both of them are looking at their phone and trying to carry on a conversation at the same time. It just doesn't work. So with that, Nehemiah saw the importance in the building of the wall. That was his purpose. So he had other responsibilities, but this was his priority. So when he was badgered by interrupters, he had a key answer. I'm building the wall and I can't come down. Now, it doesn't mean you're so solo focused that we don't do anything else. Nehemiah took time to develop a defense system in case of attack. He led a band of those returning from captivity and a host of other things, but his main priority was building the wall. So the question is, we have to ask ourselves, what's our priority? And as you mentioned, doing an analysis of our time, that's always an important thing that, when we if you want to lose weight, just do an analysis of what you eat and how much you exercise. And if you want to know where your time is going, do an analysis, just keep a log and then take a look at it and say, are you accomplishing what God has you to do? The Lord Jesus Christ was perfect in this. And notice what he said. He said his food was to do the will of him who sent him. He said, I came down from heaven not to do my own will, but the will of him who sent me. So stop and think of how many times when you're interrupted and it seems like this is the urgent saying, hey, come over and help me, and we have to say, is this the priority? What would happen if you were like Nehemiah and said to some of those wannabe interruptions, hey, I'm building something great and I can't come down?
Yeah. This is a little bit of a rabbit hole, but I watch this program, and the program is basically about, it's called Social Dilemma, and basically it's about how they made all of these different social media websites to become addictive. That was the goal. That was something that was engineered into them on purpose. And the people that are now trying to bring attention to it are the ones that realized, I created this, and man, am I messing up this world. Because what has happened, so most of the people that are aware of the algorithms, and we talk about algorithms on this show a lot, they are aware of things that are absolutely and utterly disturbing. Like, if you type in Florida the word "the environment is," you're going to get different answers than somebody in California. And you know why? Because they are catering the answers to stuff that they know you, in general, will click on because of where you live and who you're surrounded by. So all they're doing is making it to where nobody really knows what the truth is. But it divides us completely because it becomes an echo chamber wherever you are. And they did that on purpose because their goal isn't to say the truth. Their goal was to get you to keep clicking on stuff so they could make more money. Scary. So I say all that because I will tell you that you will not pass away from this earth and think to yourself when you get to heaven, man, I never got to see this website. You may say that about the Grand Canyon, but you won't say that about a website. So put down the phone. It's consciously being made to pull you away from what's important. Mm-hmm. Stay on the wall. Don't come down for that phone. Don't come down for that social media because it's purposely being made, and I absolutely believe, once again, that our pal, Satan, is involved in that. So
he's hardly our pal, but yeah, I understand what you're saying.
You know what I'm saying. That was pure sarcasm. But anyway, question number 2 from the mental aspect, and let's really talk about this. So when we get distracted, how can we mentally handle having our priorities, but then family calls us away or another priority calls us away? Like how do we handle that?
Well, first of all, you go back to really outline what your priorities are. Obviously, family takes a priority. I mean, that's a God-given priority, but we have to also watch out, that takes you away from the real order of things. And the real order is God, family, and the rest of things. But it boils down to this, that you make that decision based on some priorities that you've set beforehand. Just as you do, JT. I mean, I'm sure that you have priorities, what is important. I mean, sometimes your boys call you away and they're a priority for you.
They are. They're always the priority. Yep.
Yeah. As much as, you have the responsibility of bringing them up in the nurture of the admonition of God. And so when it comes to making decisions or prioritizing a to-do list or your schedule, if you have written down priorities, it's an easy task. I mean, it's easy to just plug them in where they belong. Otherwise, you run the risk of conflicting with yourself. And so it's a hard thing to do, to write down your priorities. But once you do, you find out it's really easy to prioritize your to-do list and your schedule.
Yeah, you have always been a list guy, and you've always kept a planner. And I think you don't even use a digital planner. You still use a hard copy planner.
I
right?
do, yeah.
And Amy's like that. Amy likes the hard copy. She likes to have a calendar. She likes to physically write it down. And it's funny because I've so transitioned into the digital that I only look at the digital calendars now, which I don't know if that's good or bad, or maybe I should have been the star of the Social Dilemma show that I watched. I don't know. But having a list is really the most important thing, is making sure that you sit down and you organize. Because if you don't, you will always get distracted by something, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, I think that's really the point is, when you're sitting down and you're organizing your day, when you're organizing your week, when you're organizing your year, sit down and make those big priorities and make sure that you are putting those first as far as what needs to happen. And yeah, I mean, distractions, you got to triage those. If it's family, like Bob said, obviously that's something that has to take priority.
Yeah.
I think about when, my Aunt Kathy got cancer. Well, somebody needed to go over there and take care of her, and certainly that's me. That's family, right? Mm-hmm. So regardless of all the other things that I had planned, she is my priority.
Yeah,
and that's a God-given priority. So, yeah. Anyway, let's turn to the physical side of life, as we always do, and let's talk about some weight loss do's or don'ts. This we can probably have a lot of fun with. And I hate to say it, when it goes down to we don't know what the truth is, I actually watched some guy talk about how meat can give you type 2 diabetes. I'm like, there's no sugar in meat, dude. What are you talking about? Meat does not affect you in any way insulin-wise. What are you talking about? So anyway, there's so many things that are true and untrue, but let's talk about some of the do's and don'ts that we know are probably legitimate.
Yeah, thanks. I want to thank the people at Hammer Nutrition, because this is on their website. The do's and don'ts: do reduce your carbohydrate calorie intake by 30 to 50%. That'll help you lose weight.
For sure.
Do replace fluid losses. In other words, drink more water. That'll help you lose weight. Do limit your calorie intake later in the day. That means consume your last meal 3 hours before bedtime. That'll help you. Do prolong aerobic exercise or frequent anaerobic exercise to increase the rate of weight loss daily. And do limit your weight loss rate to half a pound to a pound a week. That'll help you to keep it off. But do not impose hunger severity initiating stages of starvation. In other words, that goes against you. Many times people say, I just won't eat 2 or 3 or 4 days, and then you end up eating a lot. Do not take stimulants, steroids, or diuretics, and do not consume excess amounts of packaged fast foods, and do not attempt a weight management lifestyle without requiring regular daily exercise, and do not drink alcohol. What do you think, JT?
Well, the last one always makes me laugh because, once again, I found a whole bunch of stuff online that says, beer is actually a good recovery drink, which we've talked about before, which to me is a joke. No, it's not. Yeah. It's a diuretic. It makes you lose fluid. That's what it does. It's alcohol. Yeah, if you want to have a beer after a bike ride, knock yourself out. But don't expect that you're recovering because of that beer that you chose to have. It does have some carbs, though, in there, though. So anyway, I just think it's so funny. For me, the most important thing, honestly, is the eating before bed. And I actually, if I pick up a package on something and it says added sugar in it of any quantity, I don't eat it. Mm-hmm. I don't want any added sugar. There's a lot of things that you eat that have sugar naturally in them, and that's perfectly fine because they're in their fiber. Usually it's like fruit, stuff like that. It's in its fiber form, and your body knows how to handle that sugar. But as soon as you take it out of that fiber form, your body doesn't know how to handle it, and it ends up just storing it. So, yeah, do yourself a favor. Stay away from sugar. That's my
Speaking of
two
that,
cents.
Jan was in a meeting yesterday, and a bunch of gals, and some of them thought they were doing themselves a good favor because they were drinking cranberry juice. But when you looked at the label on the cranberry juice, there was a little bit of cranberry juice, but the rest of it was high fructose corn syrup.
Oh, that's awful. It's so bad.
That didn't have a lick of good. Anyway, it takes discipline to change your lifestyle in order to lose the extra pounds, but losing the extra pounds makes the discipline worth it. So discipline, as we say, makes the difference in all aspects of life. Check out today's show notes at bobbrubaker.com. Click on the Power Break podcast. Today is show number 291.
And submit your questions by email to jt@bobbrubaker.com, and we'll get to answering your question on an upcoming Power Break podcast.
Quick word for The Power of Time Management and Finding the Delight in the Lord's Day, 2 books we talked about today. You'll find them at bobbrubaker.com.
Well, thank you for joining us for the Power Break podcast. Please subscribe and leave a review wherever you've downloaded the podcast, and check out show notes, news, Bob's weekly blog, and other cool things at bobbrubaker.com. And listen next week for the Power Break podcast.